If we say 81% of Afrikaners feel positive about what you do, are with you, does that also then mean that roughly 81% Afrikaners are saying today, we simply do not believe in any shape or form in the ideals of the multi-racial, multicultural, rainbow nation democracy?
There's a spectrum.
My guest is Dirk Hermann, CEO of the Solidarity Movement. Solidarity, of course, is one of the most controversial organizations in South Africa, admired by its supporters, but fiercely criticized by its enemies. Many claim that Solidarity is tarnishing South Africa's reputation abroad, criticizing the organization for going so far as to knock on the doors of the White House. How dare they? Inviting intervention in South African politics from the outside. Today, we will explore Solidarity's roots, the evolution of the organization since the 1990s, and its achievements, criticism it faces, including some of the criticism of voices like Max de Preez, who, by the way, used to be one of my editors many, many years ago. Welcome, Dirk.
Thank you very much.
Dirk, this is our first meeting. I think I wrote to you an email and I said to you that I think I've spoken to just about every single Afrikaner leader of the past 20 years, but we've not spoken, we've not met. So we got to correct that record. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me. Another thing, on a personal note, I did a little bit of research. I know that you are an Afrikaner in heart and soul, but I read somewhere that at least a part of your family can be traced back to the 1820 British settlers. So
that's correct.
I guess my first question is, are you at least in part Soti, Rooinek?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. We did some family research, and especially a nephew of mine, and he went then back on your roots. My assumption always was that I am a German. Hermann with two N's at the end is definitely a German surname. So that was our assumption. But he did some research and he went back to 1820. And he then found that our first forefather here was James Hermann, not with two N's, but with one. And he was part of the British settlers. I must say that if you go back even further, I think that Hermann is not an original English surname. I think if you go even further, it will have German heritage. But the fact is, I then was an 1820 settler. And wow, that's actually a history that one can be proud of. It's really people that made a tremendous difference in South Africa. But the interesting thing is, this James Hermann then got married with a Nooi Roos, and then from there on, he became Dutch, and later on, of course, Afrikaner. And then in the first war against the English, his problem was with this Hermann with the one N. The people then also thought he was English, and then he decided, no, he must Germanize his name so that he can fight on the side of the Boers. And then he became Hermann with two N's. And from there on, we are Boers.
So it's that extra N that you got. That's what it's all about. Now, let's talk about your position within Solidarity, the Solidarity movement. Flip Base is the chairman of Solidarity. You are the CEO of the movement. Sketch us just your role within the broader organization and just a kind of a framework of the organization.
Let me start with a framework of the organization. It's quite an old organization. We started in 1902. It was just after the Anglo-Boer War. So we have a long history in South Africa. And the history of our organization is really part of the whole South African history. Every time there was a big event in the South African history, the old Mine Workers Union, later on Solidarity, was part of. So it started actually in 1902. Then we were quite positioned on the far right side of the politics here in the, let's say, end of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And then 94 came, and it was the big transition. And then we as an organization was confronted, of course, I was not there at that stage, but we were confronted with a crisis of existence, because the fact is, especially the last part of the old mine workers union was a part of resistance against change. That change was then completed. What's your role now? It was not only the mine workers union that was confronted with that, it was actually the broader Afrikaner organized world, because most of the Afrikaner institutions were organized as in the shadow of the different political parties, well, especially the Conservative Party and the National Party. And then came the transition, and they disappeared alongside the two specific political parties. Yeah. We survived very, very closely. The fact is that we were confronted with the question on what now? And I remember when I started in 1997, there was an article written about us, the tragic death of the old mine workers union, because we were formed in 1902, and now we are faced with a tragic death. And within this, Flip Buys was then elected as General Secretary in 1997. I was also then appointed as an organizer of the old mine workers union. I was the first appointee of Flip Buys. And then Flip, at his first Congress, delivered his first address to the Congress. And there he said that if you look at the current situation in South Africa with the ANC, the ANC ideology is a struggle ideology, and the struggle ideology can't govern. We must build a movement. And that was quite significant, because there was a euphoria around South Africa and the new era, and Nelson Mandela and rugby jersey, etc. And here Flip stands on an organization that was declared dead. And Flip say, well, that we must build a movement because we want to create a future in South Africa for our community. And so then we started to build a movement.
Let me just interrupt you there, Dirk. Was Flip in his position already at the point of the elections in South Africa? And
yes.
Can you tell me, how did you get to know Flip? I know you told somebody that I think you were a student in Texas or something like that. You made contact with Flip via some email chat group or something like that. Just how did you and Flip get together, or how did Flip get to you, and what was Flip's position at that point? Was he already the leader of the old mine workers union, or?
Flip was elected as secretary of the old mine workers union in 1997. The mine workers union was then confronted with two problems. They were bankrupt financially, and they were also bankrupt from an idea level. He was appointed in June 1997, and at that time I was an intern in Texas, in Fort Worth, at Dan and Yogurt, and I thought my future plans was one of two things. In the first place, I considered to go back to the university. I was lecturer at that stage at the old Potchefstroom University, or the other possibility was to go into the business world, and that was my bigger possibility, because my dad was the CEO of Clover at that stage. So that was what I thought. And then Flip and me started to communicate on an email group, and then at some stage I wrote a piece to Flip. I flew from Texas to Las Vegas. And then when I was there in the air, I saw this desert. and then suddenly the city. And I wrote a piece on a vision beyond and desert. And then he said to me, come and help to build the old mine workers union.
You're sitting in the plane, you're flying to Las Vegas, you see the city below you and this vast desert, and you thought about this idea there must be some kind of a vision in the head of these people to have created this city. Is this how
That's absolutely, that's,
and
yeah.
then you pinned this down and you shared that story with Flip, based at the time. Okay.
And Flip said I must come back to South Africa. If I come back to South Africa, I must come for an interview. So I came back to South Africa and then visited Flip at his house. And I must say, Flip then sketches a picture to me, a vision of a movement. But I did not realize how bankrupt this old right-wing organization was. So when I started in less than a month after the interview, I realized, listen, this is a crisis. So I went to Flip, but I said, Flip, where's the movement? And he said, well, we must build the movement. So I called my dad, and I remember my dad he's still alive. He's now 19 years old, a wise old man. And I called him. He's the chief executive of Clover, and he thought that I will come and work for his company. And I said to him, Dad, I've got an offer from the Mine Workers Union. And I wonder what will his reaction be. And he said to me, congratulations. So then I started at the old Mine Workers Union, and we started to build the old Mine Workers Union. We started with the Mine Workers Union itself, started to reposition it, started to appoint new people. Henk Schalakamp, that's today the chief executive of Canton, the property development company, we appointed him. Then we appointed Kali Kriel at that stage as marketing head of the old Mine Workers Union.
Are you still at this point, you're still the Mine Workers Union? You're still called the Mine Workers Union?
Oh, the Mine Workers Union. That was, so Henk started in 1998, Kali in 1999, and then we've decided to change the name. So in 2001, we changed the name to Solidarity. There was a short period of time that we called ourselves the Mine Workers Union Solidarity, and then we dropped the Mine Workers Union, we started with Solidarity. At that stage, we had round about, it's not sure how, what was our membership figure at that stage, around about 22,000 members. Nobody is absolutely sure. I've got different figures because our administration system was of such a nature that we did not know exactly how many members we had. So then we've decided to implement the idea of the movement. So the first thing that we've done in 1949, within the old Mine Workers Union, we started the Mine Workers Union Helping Hand. And we decided in 2001 to create a new institution, the Solidarity Helping Hand, and we took that out of the unions itself, and we started an own institution. So, and then after that, we've decided to start with Soltec. But at that stage, we've realized that we are bankrupt. We don't have money. We've changed some systems so that our members' dues were collected more effectively, but we simply did not have enough money. So what to do then? So we went to our members from mine to mine. I did it myself, factory floor to factory floor, and asked every member to donate 10 rands a month more. And we started to what we called a build fund, and that build fund was then used to finance Soltec. And then after that, we've established AfriForum, because we've realized that the trade union must focus on the workplace. We need someone to look at more civil rights issues. And then after that, we started with academia. And the 10 rands helped with that. And then we went back to our members, and we've asked them to donate 5 rand each more. And that 5 rands was then used for study aid. at the different institutions. And then it continued. We started later on the School Support Center, Marula Media, the FRK then also became part of us. And then we started with a whole movement of institutions. Yeah. And then we've combined that later on in a trust called the Solidarity Movement Trust. And Flip then became the chairperson of the trust, the Solidarity Movement Trust. And then I'm today the chief executive of Solidarity, and of course I also play a role in the trust.
Yeah. The part of the story that I find very attractive is, once again, something that I read somewhere or in an interview, that you told somebody that Flip addressed a conference or a congress. He was at the point in which he had obviously himself in his own mind decided that it's over. The mine workers union is out of money, out of members. He's going to start a new movement. But during this congress, I noted it here for me, you said in this interview that Flip Base told the audience, it was somewhere in the mid-90s, that the euphoria about the happy rainbow nation, the bliss, the exaltation, the excitement, the ecstasy of Nelson Mandela, that's not going to last. Yeah. That has not got staying power. At this moment in history will not last.
Remember, Flip is by heart and federalist. He also believed that the South Africa actually would have done much better if we had a federal system and not a unitary system. But then we've realized that political federalism in South Africa is not going to work. So we must look at alternatives to take the idea of federalism further on. So Flip then believed in what he called community federalism. That means that a community takes self-responsibility within, of course, the reality of the bigger South African reality and the South African Constitution. So Flip said at that specific Congress that, well, if you look at the ideology of the ANC, it's a centralized ideology based on a very strong socialist idea, and it's a struggle ideology. And one can just look at the history of struggle ideology, centralized economy, central control. Then you can look at the history of the world and you can see that that simply did not work in any part of the world. So that's quite easy. You must just read what the ANC say. It's applicable for today. And then you must believe them. So Flip read what the ANC said, and he believed them. And he realized that we're going to sit with a situation where they want to centrally control South Africa. And we see it now more and more, how they want to centrally control. So it's a ideological problem. And then he said, our vision is then for communities to take self-responsibility and to make sure that one try to get solutions beyond the state, so that we are not dependent on that. Yeah. And that is the broad ideology of idea of vision that Flip had already in 1997, and of course I was a big supporter of that.
Yeah. Am I right if I interpret him as seeing that a strong central state will, by definition, push out the smaller identities in South Africa and will minimize, have a huge impact on the Afrikaner people and the Afrikaner identity? Central government would be a threat to the continued existence of the Afrikaner as an ethnic group, or other ethnic groups as well.
That's the logic end of a central uniform.
It's got to become one.
It's got to be. It's the whole idea of representativity that they use to push through the majorities demographics all over South Africa in every institution, on every level. And we've seen that in 1998 when the Employment Equity Act was enacted. The whole base of the Employment Equity Act was the whole notion of representativity. And if you be honest about representativity, although it's presented to you in nice liberal terms like equality and fairness, the fact is that at the end of the day, it's the national demographics that is forced through on all levels of society, and that leads to uniformity. And that is to the detriment of the diversity of our beautiful country, not only to the detriment of Afrikaners, it's to the detriment of the diversity of the country. And we now experience as well that the same kind of frustration from other minority groups in South Africa, and specifically other cultural groupings in South Africa that feel frustrated because even in the black so-called black South Africa, black uniformity trumps diversity and cultural identity, and that is the crisis. So Flip seen not only the problem of Afrikaners, but he's seen a bigger systemic problem for South Africa.
Yeah. It was, I think, what is it? The Mozambican president, Machel, I think, who said something about, help me out here, the ethnic group will have to suffer, will be denied for the nation to live.
For the nation to grow, the tribe must die.
Yeah.
And that is exactly...
And that was what Flip saw and realized, and he realized that if we don't do something about it, it is inevitable that the Afrikaner and the Afrikaner identity will disappear in the future South Africa. And that is the basis, the philosophical departure point for why the organization was created.
Yeah, I think broadly, yes.
Yeah. You created Academia, Saltec, Helping Hand, Marula Media, AfriForum. Was that the plan right from the start, or did it gradually emerge into that,
It gradually emerged. Broadly, we said from the beginning, from 1997, and that was how I was recruited. I was recruited on the idea of a movement. And so that was the broad idea framework, but exactly how and what, I think that was not clear. For instance, the absolutely success of AfriForum, we did not foresee that in the beginning. We started actually in the beginning with the idea that we will have a leg within Solidarity and that take responsibility for failures on municipal levels. And if I say the success of AfriForum, I especially refer to what they do on local level, local municipal level. They actually do amazing work. I know they are in the media about America, etc., and kill the boer, kill the farmer, but the work on the ground, that we did not 100% foresee that we will have an institution that will do that, but that involved. And we knew that we will go big in the on the educational side. That we knew. That is why we started with Saltec. Academia was a bit different because we thought that it's simply not possible to build a on-campus university from a community. We thought that it's financially not viable, and we also thought the time is past. We must use new technology. So we started with new technology, video technology, to establish a centra around South Africa for academia. And then we've got an external consultant, and we've used Tiens Elof, and asked him to look at academia, and he came back and he said, you must build an on-campus offering. We thought it's not possible. And that is something that we did not foresee. So we started with that. Now we are in the process to build the 3.2 billion rand campus, and we just purchased land in the Paarl region in the Western Cape for a campus there as well. So that we did not foresee. That's even bigger than we thought. Helping Hand was logic. We planned that from the beginning. A media company we did not foresee, but Marula then involved logically later on. We did not foresee that the FRK, the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Associations, will join us. They did, so that also helped. Schools, we knew that we must get involved in schools, but now we know, and that is our big challenge forward, is how to build independent, a system of independent schools, high quality schools. That's our next big challenge.
Yeah. It's an astronomical amount of money, 3.2 billion, I think you said. And earlier you said you ask your members, if you pay us 10 Rand more every month, we're going to do these things. How do you put the money together to go into an initiative like this? Is this massive investment, or is it still based on this fantastically romantic idea of everybody's paying 10 Rand a month extra?
You can't build a campus of 3.2 billion Rand with 10 Rand. You can make that calculation. So let me just explain you that. People ask us that, and then people simply can't believe that you can have cultural entrepreneurs, that successful business people within the cultural environment. I think if you are successful within the community or cultural environment, you must get some money from somewhere. People ask, where do you come? Your money come from which international institution? Who funds you? It's very simple. We started with Solidarity, and there we started to change our membership due system. We doubled our income in Solidarity by changing systems, by bettering our systems. That was our first breakthrough. Right, then we started to grow, and Solidarity became financially sustainable with some surpluses. The second thing that we did then, we went to our members, asked for the 10 Rands. The 10 Rand started to build a Soltech, later on an academia, later on the Boekeroe education. That's our third institution. And we started that with 10 Rands. That you can do with 10 Rands. Because it's just money that you need to start to stimulate that specific institutions, and then student dues come in and they can become self-reliable. So academia and Soltech is to a large extent now self-reliable. So we don't need the 10 Rands for them anymore. So now we can move that to the schools. The third thing that we did was we said that we must mobilize our members' capital. So then we started the financial services company. We started the short-term insurance product, and we started a couple of other financial services, and that helped tremendously to finance our efforts. So through this, we are now at a place where we could actually get our institutions going. Some institutions like AfriForum, we started to help and support AfriForum, but AfriForum now, via membership dues, go on their own. 95% of AfriForum's income at this stage is from membership dues. So, and then we realized we must start with a new kind of entrepreneurial initiative. So Helping Hand, we started in the beginning, supported them from the trade union, and then they started the second-hand shops. I think they have now 127 second-hand shops, one of the biggest shop networks in South Africa. So Helping Hand is 100%, no, not 100%, they are subsidized now, not subsidized, I can't call it subsidized, but they are financed via entrepreneurial initiatives. We started the Marula Market that helps to support Marula. We started now a new platform for solidarity where we facilitate workers and employees, etc., and that helped to finance solidarity. It's all entrepreneurial initiatives. But then we were confronted. We must build. How do we build? And then Henk Skalekamp, that started there in 1998, he started with the initiative of a property development company. And he said that we must mobilize capital. We must facilitate a relationship between capital and culture. So what we must do is we must get an investment opportunity for capital that in the first place will focus on the financial gain of an investor, and then also the cultural gain that comes with that. So we then commercialized in the first place our own property, the one that I sit in right now, AfriForum's building. We commercialized that in the sense of we ask Solidarity and AfriForum market-related rent, and then we started a new company, Canton. Canton is then a property development company, and then through gearing of the Solidarity and the building and the AfriForum building, we could build the Saltec campus just through gearing of property. And then we started to gear the Saltec campus, and there we could build the Saltec hostels. And there we got our first investor, and then we decided to go with this to the market and to banks to finance the new academia campus. So what we do is the property and the buildings is owned by Canton, and then academia and Saltec is renting that, and Solidarity, etc. And it's market related, so you have a long-term sustainable group that rent a specific property, and that is a very, very viable and attractive investment opportunity for an investor. So the 3.2 billion rand, that includes the development of the campus in the Western Cape, that will all be financed via investors. So this is thus a good managed financial entrepreneurial movement, and that is where our money comes from. There's nothing funny.
To help me to understand it and to help people to understand it, the accusation is, of course, that Solidarity is building parallel systems. And it has a negative connotation by itself in terms of at least politically so. But what is the core philosophy here really is that if the culture does not do it on its own, the culture will disappear. That's the basic idea that backs all of this. A do-it-yourself kind of an attitude.
Yeah, ons self. We take self-responsibility. And that is the notion of parallel state is not a correct notion. We are within a bigger South African state. We take self-responsibility within the bigger South African realities. And what we do is we do it within the realities of the South African Constitution. The South African Constitution enables us to do that. And what we experience is the moment that you do this, then you create an environment where Afrikaners feel less estranged. And the moment that people feel, well, I have a place where I can belong, I feel more positive, then they take more effectively part in the bigger environment as well. So our role is not at all to isolate ourselves. Our role is actually to enable people to play a bigger role in South Africa. So we believe it's important to bond, but it is even more important to bridge. And that is why we have as much bridging projects as bonding projects with other communities in South Africa. And our people work all across South Africa. As Saltec student, we train them, and then from there, they build South African infrastructure somewhere in the country.
Am I right if I say it's kind of almost like a natural evolutionary outcome based on the idea that we've created in 94 a central state? And because of the vast diversity that we have in the country, and also because it's within the character of the Afrikaner people to want to kind of do it his own way, that it's natural that it would lead into the creation of an organization such as the Solidarity Movement. It's an evolutionary natural process.
It is. The South Africa is too diverse and simply too big to be centrally controlled. You must have a much more federal structure in South Africa. And because we don't have a natural politically federal structure, unfortunately, what happens is a very natural thing now. Communities take self-responsibility. Just this week, we've met with a network of Black entrepreneurs. And the interesting thing is, they said that their whole network is a copy of the Solidarity movement and specifically also AfriForum. And they said to us that they are there to talk to us so that we can help them and share ideas, not from a point of view where we see ourselves as having all the answers, because every community do it on its own interesting ways. But we plan now a joint conference within the next couple of weeks or months, and then we're going to say, oh, how can we as networks take hands and get answers? In rural areas, in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, AfriForum has a lot of initiatives because that's just logic. The communities want to take self-responsibility. The fact is that the unitary state is not an answer for a diverse South Africa.
Yeah. Help me out here, Dirk, because what you do, the way you describe it, the way I understand it, seems to me, my interpretation of that's quite progressive. That what you do is quite progressive. And I use the word progressive very specifically. I don't mean liberal, I mean progressive. Why is it then so that at least amongst certain members of our population or certain people in South Africa, the image is still painted of a backward, conservative, clinging to the past organization? Where is it going wrong in the understanding of the organization? And I want to just repeat that again. What you do seems to me, I would almost call, well, liberal and progressive are words that I could associate with it. Liberal in the sense of the greatest freedom is the freedom to be who you are, the freedom to be your own nation, your own identity, your own culture, the right to that freedom. But the way you do it is pretty progressive. So why this rotten image?
It's very difficult to answer that question, because I had a discussion with one of these group of Afrikaners that wrote a letter actually attacking us. And I said to him that if I read what you say about us and the different articles in the past month, year or two, I simply don't recognize ourselves. That's not us. But what I've experienced is that if I look at the groupings that attacked us at this stage, in all respect, Johan, you are also on the older side, but I see how they actually judge us from a time period when they were politically active. Because what they say is they try to judge us, then they say, but we discovered you vote no in the referendum, and you were supporters of the Conservative Party, etc. As if, and that's the paradox for me, that they can't make that shift to the new realities. And I know it's very difficult to say that, but we believe that we were born actually in a post-1994 era, and I think we get answers for the current realities. We don't belong to the past. In fact, if someone tells us, well, you are just longing back to apartheid, the fact is that our whole philosophy is exactly the opposite. We don't believe in a central control system. In fact, Afrikaners paid a high price for the centrally controlled system of the National Party from 1948, where we find our ideas of community freedom, one can call it, is actually the time between the republics after in 1902, after the loss of independence of the Boer republics, and just before 1961, the big republic. And that was the time. That was the time of the Helperkar movement. And that was the time just after the Anglo-Boer War, then the Helperkar movement. And then in the 1930s, the Reddingsdaad. That was exciting times. That was the ideas of Volkskapitalisme, the spirit of the Helperkar movement, the birth of Sandam and Santam and Volkskas, later on APSA, the birth of Afbob, etc. That is the things that excites us. And that was a time where there was actually not a state backing Afrikaners. Then 48 came, and then 61 came, and suddenly the state actually controlled everything. So if we get a solution now, we can't go back to that. We say no, we jump actually back to the period of Helperkar and Reddingsdaad. And that is what we do. We build actually an answer beyond the state. That's actually freedom. That's actually freedom to say that we take self-responsibility. So, Jan, in all respect, it's very difficult for me to understand why people paint us in corners simply because of pre-1994 definitions that simply don't exist anymore.
I want to talk to you about numbers, because I've had the struggle myself now to puzzle out. I'm trying to figure for myself what percentage one would, what the estimations, ideas, a feel for who would support your organization versus the idea of us happily finding our individuality and our lives within the broader concept of the multiracial, multicultural, central state democracy. How many people support you? I got numbers here from the internet here, 600,000 families, representing roughly 2 million people. Is that correct?
That's broadly correct. Physically members, we have AfriForum, Solidarity, the FRK, and the Helping Hand. They are all membership organizations. And that is round about just a bit more than 500,000 members. So that's people that every month pay their dues. But then we have other participants in the bigger movement. And that participants includes students at the different institutions. That includes people that make use of Volkschool and people that take up our products, etc. That's roughly 100,000 more. So that's just over 600,000 people, around about 500,000 plus members and around about 100,000 plus other participants in the movement. That's around about 600,000. One can say that can be around about 2 million families. Now, why I think that is quite correct. We believe that we are an 80% organization. On our right, there's around about 10% people that simply don't, I don't want to simplify it, but that don't support us. And on the left, there's maybe also around about 10%. So we position ourselves as an 80% organization. The interesting thing is the Beter Einders published research a couple of months ago, and that research, interesting enough, showed that a bit more than 80%.
Is that was the ground control or something like that?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. And that they said that research also showed, and that's not our research, showed a bit more than 80% of people support us, much less are against us, and then a couple of and then there's also people that's neutral, but around about 80%. So I think we are an 80% organization that we position ourselves like that.
Silly question, but I think it's interesting. What do you think drives your success primarily? The good that you do, the logic of what you're doing, the sense of what you're doing, and the results that you're delivering, or the abysmal failure of the African National Congress? What drives your numbers up? or a combination of both those two?
No, it's definitely a combination, because the people experience this absolute failure of the ANC, and they are frustrated with that. And we then come with a solution. If we were only built on the failures of the ANC, and we said, join us because look how they fail, we would not have been successful. We must pull them with a vision to say that how's the answer on that? How can we create a future here that's prosperous for you here in South Africa? We are not we don't want to be refugees in someone else's country. We want to get the answer here, and we want to build here. And I think that vision, the fact that the people can take part and they can see things, they can see how we built a university. There's a Saltec, there's a AfriForum branch, there's a Helping Hand branch, there's a solidarity platform where you can get work. So people can physically see how we built the future. And at the end of the day, I think our success lies in that. Although the ANC, of course, helps a lot.
If we say, Dirk, that according to this ground control research, what you said yourself now and the numbers you gave me, if we say 81% of Afrikaners feel positive about what you do, are with you, does that also then mean that roughly 81% Afrikaners are saying today, we simply do not believe in any shape or form in the ideals of the multi-racial, multicultural, rainbow nation democracy? Does that mean for this proportion, the idea of the current is not something that they anymore support?
I don't think that is that simple. There's a spectrum. And there's a spectrum of people that also join the bigger solidarity movement. And so the bigger solidarity movement is also, well, I don't want to use the ANC term, but we are also a broad church. There's several kind of voices within the bigger solidarity movement, and we welcome that. So there's a spectrum of people that still feel strong, that I think there's merit in the current South African constitutional system. And then there's people that join us that feel strongly about that self-determination must also includes land. So I think there's a spectrum. And so I don't want to make it that simple, that the 81% rejects all that exists in South Africa. Broadly speaking, I will think that most of the people have a real problem with the South African order, but on a very, very broad spectrum.
We talk about that. If that 81% is a slice of pie, you can't slice that pie for us more and say we have a fair idea of what sort of percentage of that percentage would say we want nothing less but self-beskikking, self-governance, and what percentage would then say, well, you know, we're very happy with as it is right now. We are building organizations that can protect our language, can protect our culture. There are pillars that we're building that's a strong enough foundation for us in which we can believe that the Afrikaner will survive the future.
Yeah, I think it's. I just want to say again, it's a spectrum. It's on a continuum. And there's different stations, and some people want to climb off on this station, and some on the other station. If the end station is then self-determination on a specific piece of land, there's a certain grouping that will go to there. Other people will say, listen, self-determination for me is just to be protected within my specific community, and that is why I joined the AfriForum Neighborhood Watch, and that will be my focus. And that's the spectrum. And we are very, very, very comfortable with that. And that is why you also see that even within the whole solidarity movement, the different institutions have different positionings. There's a huge difference between how academia position itself and how AfriForum position itself, how Solidarity position itself and how Saltec position itself. The positioning of Marula Media versus the positioning of the Helping Hand. And that is the power of a federal system. So you will also see our movement as a federal character itself. So we have to trust. But then we have institutions, and that institutions all have federal powers. They take also self-responsibility for their specific area of work, positioning themselves. So I want to stress this idea of continuum, of a broad spectrum of people. And broadly speaking, I think we stand within the idea of onsel self, and that stretches from a neighborhood watch to a place like Orania with self-determination on land.
Explain to me, I read somewhere that I'm not sure if it is Solidarity that is supporting Orania, but points to Orania as a good example of a community that can develop and maintain itself. There was talk about your organization motivating Afrikaners to settle in certain towns or whatever the case might be, to try to create a kind of an area in South Africa that will be predominantly Afrikaner based or whatever. That sounds like a kind of an incremental move towards a 235 or some form of a piece of physical geographical space.
Well, that's something that happens naturally at this stage. Afrikaners are concentrating. You will see that Afrikaners, we call it specific areas that we call it anchor areas, where Afrikaners at this stage moving to. We see the biggest track of Afrikaners, interesting enough, is not to the Western Cape but to Pretoria, but then also to the Western Cape, the southern parts of Cape, still the East Rand, still Nelspruit, etc. So we've identified certain areas where we see natural movement of Afrikaners. And we say that we must make now sure that we create cultural infrastructures for Afrikaners in the area where there's natural movement. And to help concentration. If we have concentration, then we can build schools. And if we have concentration in a city area, we can build a university. So we believe in the idea of concentration. And that also includes a place like Orania. We think there can also be a concentration point, like there's also other concentration points. And that is why I call for the idea of the continuum. From neighborhood watch up to a place like Orania. And in Orania, we, for instance, have also a technical college there, Worker education, that do extremely well. So we are quite open. And that is our call to people. Just be open. Just be comfortable. Just create opportunities much broader than only a specific idea.
The question also hinges on whether solidarity, whether the movement is propagating, pushing, agitating for it or some way, or do you say it's all part of a natural evolutionary process? And if that process finds itself in a particular pattern, we're happy to fit in within whatever that might be.
Yeah, I'm
sort of dancing around the question maybe a little bit. Point is, are you supporting that actively, or are you saying, no, this is evolution. This is just the way things are developing, and we fit in with those structures?
Well, it's evolution, but we support the evolution actively because we believe that the community that's more concentrated is much stronger. We were in Europe just a couple of weeks ago, and also to do the study about federalism. And what was very clear is that the more concentrated communities are, the stronger are the federal powers. So concentration is really a very, very strong vehicle in making sure that you can build cultural infrastructure that actually then fit that specific concentration. So yes, there's a natural evolution. We can see that. And then we also support and actively drive the idea of concentration. Saying that, we realize that Afrikaners are spread all over the country, and where Afrikaners stay, and the Afrikaners that is not moving and migrating because it's not possible, even there, we make sure that we have minimal cultural infrastructure, for instance, safety structures or a helping hand branch or a solidarity branch, etc.
Maybe it's an unfair question to ask you, Dirk, but why do you think that the political parties, and then I talk specifically about Freedom Front Plus, has done, in fact, one would say fairly close to nothing to agitate for moving towards, or at least fulfilling some of the ideals of 235? Why, if there are these natural evolutionary processes happening, and there seem to be a substantial support for it, for the idea of more and more self-governance, why has the political parties, and then once again the Freedom Front Plus, done nothing about it?
Well, it's difficult for me. Remember, political parties are, per definition, within the political structures. So what I can say is political parties' focus is then on governance areas like municipal governance, etc. And there they do extremely good work to make sure that a specific municipal area is governed effectively from a political point of view. That's something that we don't want to do at all. But it's very difficult for me to answer the rest of that question. And I think maybe that question for the political parties will be there.
I've spoken to Corné Mulder a couple of weeks ago. He assures me that there is a newfound kind of emphasis and energy around 235. I talk to a lot of people. Maybe they are on the extreme right wing. I don't know. I am accused of sometimes platforming people that are supposed to be too right-wing, and they talk a lot about 235, and I'm trying to figure out how real is this, or how real is the desire for it, or the need for it. Let's talk about the critics, Dirk. The award-winning journalist Max de Preez, he's just brought out his latest book, argues that Solidarity and AfriForum have effectively hijacked the Afrikaner mainstream. We've really touched on that already, and I think we've answered a great deal of themselves.
But we did not hijack it. The fact is just simply the Afrikaner mainstream just became part of the broader ideas of the Solidarity movement, and that's okay.
Why do people seem so surprised 30 years post-apartheid and seeing what you're doing and what other groups are doing? Why do people seem so surprised that there is this kick against central control in South Africa? That there is this fear that exists amongst Afrikaners that our culture will be wiped off the map by the African National Congress? Why are we? Why does there to be a surprise that people are busy with it and are working on these issues? And at the same time, to the Afrikaner, I suppose, or to the white man, the question would be, well, why do you seem so surprised that the ANC have made you the scapegoat for everything that's wrong in South Africa?
We are not surprised about that, the last one. But I think the thing is, what happened is that we had a very difficult history. So then 1994 came, and everyone was very anxious about the transition. And a decision was made then to go the route of a unitary state. And but then we had a period where there was real excitement about the transition, and people said that you see that transition was not that bad at all, because sometimes people underestimate the long-term effect of change, and I think that is what happened. That people did not realize what the effect, because change, especially societal change, takes sometimes generations to realize, and we are now in the second generation already. And so it took quite long for people to realize what the real change actually entails. And we actually experience now only the real change of 1994 and what the real consequences are of central control and the implementation of a failed ideology. So we really experience it only now. So and that is why people only realize it now. We've seen it quite longer, a long time ago, and that is why I have so much respect for Flip. Flip is a visionary, and so we've seen it. We started to work on that and so on, and suddenly people realize and say, "Well, what are you busy with?" It's not a new thing. We started with that in 1997. And I think that is the thing. It's actually the changes takes much longer than people think. The fact is that, of course, the ANC will try to find a scapegoat for their failures, and we are the easy scapegoat to say that it's them. It's not us, it's them. And that is the central thing of a central control government, is always someone else's fault. And that is, in this case, it's us.
I think, and I'm not trying to give you a cheap compliment now, or the organization a cheap compliment here, but I think the brilliance in the story, as I'm uncovering it and understanding it more and more, and the place and the role of AfriForum and of Solidarity, lies actually in that moment when Flip Bay says, look around you, all this happiness around this man called Nelson Mandela, the magic, all of this will disappear. It will dissipate. It will go away. And finally, we will be in a phase in which we will have to face the realities of and he saw that already back in the 90s, and that obviously led to the creation of the entire movement. I think it's pretty brilliant. Critics also accuse you guys of damaging South Africa's international reputation. That's one of those Max de Preez things. Max believes that you're damaging the reputation of the country by lobbying in the White House and all that sort of stuff. How do you answer that part of the criticism?
I want to call on Max and everyone else to read the documents that we presented to the White House and to Washington. The bulk of our documents and the bulk of our arguments in Washington was about AGOA. That was the main reason why we went over, because we've seen that AGOA is under threat. It's going to cause thousands of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs. And we've seen what the ANC did with their international policy. And we've realized, we've seen the executive order of President Trump, and we've realized that South Africa is going to pay a very, very high price. It wasn't us that danced with Iran. It wasn't us that took Israel to the International Court of Justice. It wasn't us that played freaky with China and Russia. It was the ANC. And so the fact is that they are the culprits here. It's 100% wrong to say that the messengers are the problem here. So we went over and we actually fight for South Africa. If you go and say, don't punish the country. If you want to punish someone, punish the ANC. But please don't punish the country. And that is exactly what we did. And AGOA was saved at least till the end of this year. And we just heard that we are included till the end of the year. And it was despite of government, not because of government. And we played a tremendous role in that. So to come now and say that we damage the image of the country because of the actions of the ANC. That's simply not true. The fact is that the ANC started with a campaign to say that we are busy with a misinformation campaign. And Max de Preez, etc., they actually they just took up the ANC propaganda and ran with it. We ask, well, where did we actually spread misinformation? What did we say? That's not true. There's nothing. In fact, 15 different media houses now had to apologize to us because of misinformation that they published about us. In August this year, we are in court against the minister of the presidency because the minister actually spread misinformation about us. And that will be all in the open court publicly because that's nonsense.
Dirk, I see we've really gone way over time here, so we're going to start closing down. One or two short questions. Where do you see the solidarity movement in 20 years from now?
The solidarity movement is going to be a big network of institutions. We're going to have multiple university campuses. Saltec is going to be much bigger. We're going to have infrastructure all over South Africa. Solidarity is going to be the biggest facilitator of work in the country, but we see ourselves also part of a bigger network of communities in South Africa because we foresee that South Africa is going to become more and more a community of communities, and we want to be part of that.
Sure, a short question, short answer. Do you believe South Africa is moving towards greater social cohesion? I then go back to the rainbow ideal, or greater fragmentation? Well, and then I talk about fragmentation in the sense of an evolutionary process.
We are moving to greater fragmentation and then cooperation among the fragmented.
Second last question. What gives you hope?
Just the people of South Africa. You want the experience that I have and that we have is that the horizontal relationships in South Africa is still very, very good. It's the vertical political relations that's toxic. We have good people in South Africa, and we experience it day by day, even in the union world. I think we have around about 11 cooperation agreements with different trade unions in the workplaces, with COSATU trade unions, etc. Good horizontal relationship. People of South Africa give me hope.
Yeah. Well, I've asked you what gives you hope. What keeps you awake at night?
The current government and their central ideology, and the fact that they get more radical, the more the power is under threat. And I'm worrying about that day when they must hand over power. Will they do that? Because that day is coming. But the question is, will they do that? History shows struggle organizations actually cling to power, and I hope they can be kicked out.
Last question, I promise you. If a young South African watches this interview and knows nothing about solidarity, except what the critics say about it, what is the one thing you would want that person to understand about the movement?
My call will be just get involved where you are in your community. And what you must know about us is just a call on South Africans to do your part where you are, not necessarily via the solidarity movement. And what I also tell a young South Africa, go and look at the rest of the world. And then look at all the different countries, especially the Western countries where the most people immigrated to. Take that 20 years forward and take South Africa 20 years forward, where communities take self-responsibility. Then I will tell you South Africa is the better place to be in 20 years from now.
Yeah. And I'll repeat what I said earlier on, taking self-responsibility and be who you are is, in my understanding of it, quite a progressive thing to do. Dirk Hermann, CEO of Solidarity, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Johan.